What sucks about your current role?
Well said. Oh man, how do I begin this? Year one of the company as a first-time founder, like academically, like it's been told to me, but until you feel it, you're like, okay, this is really hard. This is definitely really hard. If I were to go into a fourth run as a CMO, I'd be like, I can't do it. I just can't do it a fourth time. We are selling much more than a software product here. We're selling business transformation. We talk about Netflix often as an example. You think Netflix and you're like, okay, I need to launch a streaming service on my website. Sure, I think that's part of it, right? Yeah. And we can help enable that. A better way is, how does Netflix make their decisions as a company?
They're looking at their audience data and they're saying, we need to create a show with Ashton Kutcher around this like cowboy Western theme.
Yeah.
And we need to market that show to the Midwest
in order to improve our subscriptions. And they're using their own data to frame those decisions, to pick the actors and to plan their distribution in order to drive subscribers. The race, I think, in any software business, maybe any business ever, is can you build the brand that owns the idea?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, we can be the B2B company that had Backstreet Boys and what made matters even more crazy is the after party where this would have happened was on an aircraft carrier in the San Francisco Bay.
And you are liked by everyone who matters. How do you feel about this assessment?
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing a little bit, first of all.
What's your approach?
Say yes and like be very reactive to your calendar. Again, we spend a third of our lives at work. You know, it would not be an attack on my identity if AudiencePlus fails. What would be an attack on my identity is if people said, oh, that guy's a jerk.
Like founder to founder.
Yeah.
So how did you anticipate the 2024 going to go and where you guys are at?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're an early stage company. So 2024 will have been basically us starting our third year as a company.
Third year.
Yeah, so still pretty new. So we're about 2 years old now. You know, a lot of what we've done is public. We've built in public. And so we might have created a little bit of a perception that we're further along than we actually are. Our product is still in beta. We've got 30 some odd customers now. I think some of the big things that we were focused on doing this year in 2024, getting the product to a place of GA. So, you know, that means something, you know, ceremonial typically more than anything else. But what it means for us is like building basically getting to what we believe is product market fit and having our customers validate that and sort of earning the right to take the beta tag off. I think we're doing okay on that process. We have a few big releases this summer that are going to help set us up for that. And then a major platform announcement coming in the fall. That would likely be kind of where that moment happens. But we've re-architected our entire product from the ground up this year. And so a lot of work has gone into things that aren't being shown publicly, but that has really set us up well for the future. The other big one is content and thought leadership and community. And, you know, for a company of like 6-7 full-time employees, like we hosted a conference for 300 people in person in Brooklyn, New York, 1,400 or so watched online. And so that was something we wanted to do this year. And it happened in Q1. So we did it, which was amazing.
Because you guys are or have been early stage, what kind of planning did you do early on? Like when you started this year, like what were you anticipated to achieve? How you were planning this year?
Yeah. You know, year one of the company as a first-time founder, I honestly, I didn't take planning very seriously in the sense that like we were a small company. We just kind of knew what we had to do. Everyone was communicating. And what very quickly happened was I felt like I didn't know who was working on what. And I think the broader team had this like feeling that, you know, we didn't know what we were aiming for or working towards. And so despite some of my kind of arbitrary, like little management tricks I've learned as a CMO over the years, we really were lacking like a process, even for an early stage company. And so I talked to a lot of other founders, and many of them pointed towards something called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically it gives us some type of language as a company to be able to align around a set of goals, to do the right planning processes, to like really structure our meetings in a way that's impactful. And so late last year and coming into this planning process, we started implementing EOS as a company. And so really at a high level, what this means is in the fall, we did a management offsite where we looked to like, who do we want to become in 5 years?
Right.
And it could be foggy. It may not be precise, but like kind of squint your eyes and dream a little bit of the type of company we want to be in 5 years. Now let's work backwards from that and say, well, what do we need to do in the next 3 years to set us up, to achieve that? And then, as you can imagine, go back to 1 year. And so we kind of developed our 1 year goals for 2024. And we created this rhythm where every quarter we get together and we figure out, all right, so what are the things we need to do now in order to achieve those goals for the year? All of the goals are SMART goals, which I always get wrong, but I know like measurable and accountable are part of them. We talk about them every all hands. We lead our management team, our leadership team is kind of run off of our rocks for every quarter. And it's become this sort of tool that we use to kind of run the company. And, nothing's perfect in an early stage business, but I would say it feels like we at least have we work in an industry where there's not a lot of control. And so it feels like we have some sense of control for what we can now that we have this EOS process that's been running.
Talking about the control, did you adjust the planning to the current pre-election cycle?
No, we are just irrational, like just completely thinking everything's going to be great. No, we didn't actually. It's a good thing to consider. A lot of unknowns this year in particular.
Like, because you mentioned that you're still in beta, and then you done a bunch of refactoring. So the goal is to double down on the product, make sure that the process works, that this whole platform is scalable, right? And then kind of, so in a way, like not elections, you're not that focused on that on the acquisition right now, or do you also?
Yeah, I don't. It's a good question, right? I mean, I think like I've learned a lot as a first-time founder. It's weird, I've been an operator for so long that I have so much bias around, running things at scale, that the 0 to 1 process is so like intimidating, or just was something that I had to learn by doing. Yeah. And for better or for worse, we started like growing the company and acquiring customers and everything, and talking to the board about it, talking to investors about it, fundraising on the back of it. And looking back, like I don't know if that was a good idea or not. Like building in public, it feels like we've sort of like started the clock, meaning now we have to look at quarter-on-quarter growth, and tell that story, when in reality, we're still wrestling with the product and making our initial customers successful. And what would it have looked like if instead we said, we're not trying to measure anything right now. We're just trying to build a product and serve our customers and get to a point on our roadmap where we feel like we've achieved, a certain milestone. So to answer your question, the answer is kind of both. Like we are both, yes, refactoring the product. There are some very specific deliverables that I think are going to help us unlock product market fit. One of them just beyond our grasp now. But in addition to that, we've signed up for like a sales target and, a retention number and all of these things. And it's from where I'm sitting right now, just very, transparently, I don't know if that was a good idea or not. I'm still kind of going back and forth.
As the fellow founder, and I first built an agency that became successful, and then I thought that sky is the limit. I can do another thing successful, and I started building tech, and it sucked, and I up so many times. Then I can say you can name me like, hey Michael, how was the pricing? It sucked. How was the operation? It sucked. How was dev? It sucked. How was the design? It sucked. Like all those things. So, but then I've invested a lot of my own resources into building out that image of the product, very high quality, high-end product, high-end platform. And then because I raised the bar so high, I couldn't then go back to the scrappy startup where I can kind of, do something else, right? So from my own research, like you've with AudiencePlus, you set up the bar so high in terms of the quality, in terms of the content, like how you guys been building. then I think that you might have some kind of anxiety to be able to say, like, can we be that scrappy startup that can make so many mistakes moving on, and sort of like, if the people see that, do you have that kind of feeling?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're in my thoughts. But absolutely, we've created an aura of inevitability when we haven't earned the right. What gives me deep conviction in those moments of like that anxiety is so much strong conviction behind the problem that we're solving. Like, absolutely, there's no doubt about it that this is sort of the next generation of marketing. The products we build to get there, right? Like, I have like a whole lot of conviction behind the call it medium-term product roadmap and kind of what we're building to get there. And we've heard voices amplify that, right? Within our customer base, our community. So it's not just us like just drinking high on our own supply or whatever. Like, there's several data points that are leading us to this sort of path to inevitability, but you have to earn that right. And the danger with punching above our weight, the danger with being maybe a marketing driven founder, as well as you have a bias towards perception, you have a bias towards awareness and buzz and all these sorts of things. Again, truth to tell, I'm not sure. Like, in one part of me says it's probably a good thing, because hopefully the product will catch up and then we'll get to this moment where we'll be able to ride this wave that we've been creating. But it is a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of anxiety for not just me, but the team that has to kind of bear that burden, knowing that we can't make these like little slip ups that every company makes. Every company has these hiccups. Ours just feel a little bit more amplified. And it feels maybe like a little bit of a self-inflicted wound from that perspective.
But that's also set up some kind of like a very high bar, and the sense of ownership that now you need to right to have to fulfill that, and that also get the team motivated, right? Because
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. The race, I think, in any software business, maybe any business ever, is, can you build the brand that owns the idea?
Yeah.
The problem, the product is solvable, right? Like, that's execution, talking to customers. It's all code at the end of the day.
Right.
But can you own the mind share of this problem that you're advocating for? And from that perspective, again, a million things we might do differently, but I think we're off to a good start for a 2-year-old company here. And I think over the long arc of time, those are the companies that we remember, are the ones that are aligned to an idea. So that's kind of, I think, what's the, not shadow side, but like the positive side of all of this too, right?
I'm curious, you have 7 full-time employees and you guys raised over $5 million. Is that the way you wanted to be a scrappy startup, not kind of hire more people, keep the payroll in check, work with freelancers, have a bunch of contractors, make sure that you can leverage the modern remote gig economy, and not just basically blow up and have to raise more capital very soon? Is that the plan?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, we definitely like do work with contractors and have, a larger ecosystem of support around us than just our full-time hires. I will say, we over-indexed in hiring in 2 areas, both intentionally. One was in customer success. A lot of my bias coming from Gainsight was just this belief that, like, at the end of the day, nothing matters if your customers aren't, finding value with, you as a company, but also the products that you're building. So that's helped us build some really good muscle internally. And the other was marketing, right? We knew that we were sort of starting a movement here and wanted to, ensure that we were doing things like our Golden Hour conference, that we had our, content program where we're dropping new content every day for a company of our size. We have an executive event that last year had $106 billion of market cap in the room across 50 CMOs. So we're punching above our weight, but we're getting closer to the customer. We're getting closer to our stakeholder here, and we're learning. And all of this stuff is fundamentally driving our pipeline as well. So is this the type of company I want to build? I think, it also depends on, I would argue, who you are, your life stage, kind of, your experience as an entrepreneur. I've kind of grown up in the venture-backed, high growth kind of environment. And I wasn't in a position that I could go self-fund this, get to like some product market fit, and then go and add fuel to the fire. So for me, this was sort of, I think, from a pattern matching perspective, the type of company I knew how to build by just being close to it a couple times. So I think that was sort of what guided my thinking.
I wanted to, I'm curious about the following. So with where you are at and where you're building the platform, there is a lot of competition, especially in this space of like when there's some newsletter companies that are popular that are adding the videos and that are adding some other platforms, etc. Like who do you personally think your competitors are in this space right now and later on? Who do you compete with? And just generally, what's your take on the space? What's you're mostly concerned of about the space, and what you're more inspired about in the space?
Yeah, in terms of today's competitors, I mean, we definitely know that there's quite a bit of innovation happening on the consumer side of the industry. So, there's, to your point, the Substacks and Patreons of the world and others. And I think those are very different use cases in general, but helpful to validate kind of the broader concept that we need to own our audience. We need to have a direct relationship with them. We need to use media in a strategic way. We have to develop exclusive content just for our kind of subscribers. So I think that there's a lot of good that comes from that kind of, we're not alone in saying,
right,
and kind of bringing this message to market. But I've never met a company that's using, a B2B brand that has a demand gen problem using Substack today, or, any of these tools to help solve that problem. There's specific features, around like, integration with your marketing automation system or whatever, that those tools just aren't going to prioritize building. And they own the email channel for the most part, which is great and an important one. We think that in addition to that, the website's an important kind of digital surface for brands to kind of build that relationship with their audience. So I'd say, who do we compete with today? It's mostly, honestly, like the CMSs of the world, an in-house build. I want to build this on WordPress or Webflow.
It's the worst decision ever. I've done that. I built my custom CMS. I've spent probably $1 million on doing that and then you're like, why? And then you need to support it, right?
You need to support it. Exactly. It's hard to maintain. In the marketing sense, sometimes, you need an engineering resource just to publish a change to the site versus like having something that's tailor-made. So I think that's part of it. Now, how does that bridge to like our long-term competitive differentiation? I think in general, we've sort of the first product, hinting towards kind of what we talked about earlier, that we brought to market is this like media-driven CMS. It's a blog replacement or a resource center replacement on your website, makes it more media-driven. You can have the ability to collect subscribers, understand kind of what they're watching, have exclusive content just for subscribers and so on. That's like the first use case. We think that's a means to an end. And the broader end is around the first party engagement data that you're now collecting around your audience, where it's not just, how many impressions or views or listens did this piece of content get, but how do we make sense of all of this engagement data in general to better understand the type of content we should be producing for specific cohorts of our audience? What topics, what creator collaborations should we prioritize? What formats of content should we produce? Should this be a podcast or an ebook or a blog post or whatever? Our audience leaves this kind of digital breadcrumb trail with us as they're engaging with all this content. And we haven't found a company that's really in a modern way putting that data to work, especially in this sort of, we'll call it AI kind of revolution that we're all living in today. So I think, the best model that comes to mind for a company that takes digital conversions and puts it into a database is the marketing automation kind of category. It's static data, it's living in sort of a contact record. And, we think that there's an opportunity to rebuild, those solutions with AI kind of at the core of the infrastructure.
So then something like attribution and then nurturing will be a part of basically like the offering, right? So that expanding the usability of the content for the marketers.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And more. We think about it. We talk about Netflix often as an example, but not for the reason that I think, not for the cognitive reference people have with Netflix. You think Netflix and you're like, okay, I need to launch a streaming service on my website. Sure. I think that's part of it, right? Yeah. And we can help enable that. A better way is, how does Netflix make their decisions as a company? They're looking at their audience data and they're saying, we need to create a show with Ashton Kutcher around this cowboy Western theme. Yeah. And we need to market that show to the Midwest in order to improve our subscriptions. And this is a real example.
In that location, right? Because we're losing the market there. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Mhm.
And they're using their own data to frame those
Makes
decisions,
sense.
to pick the actors and to plan their distribution in order to drive subscribers. What would that look like for us in B2B if
Yeah.
we said, we're selling to chief customer officers in the healthcare industry? Well, what topics do they care about? What formats of content at scale are they consuming? Maybe within your own network, or maybe even aggregated across
Yeah.
the public web. And how do we distribute them? We think it might be LinkedIn, but it turns out for whatever reason, that group is on YouTube. And so we need to inject our short form content into the YouTube channels. That's the future that I see for digital marketing. And I think we want to build the underlying platform to power that.
This is nice. So you've been in a marketing executive role for the majority of your career, like over 13 years. And now for 2.5, almost 3 years, you're the founder.
Yeah.
What sucks about your current role?
Well said. Oh man, how do I begin this? Look, I think let's put it this way. This is the only founding job I'll ever have in my life. So we're going to make this one really, really successful.
Yeah. That's nice.
But it's not, I just remember being the CMO under Nick, who was the CEO at Gainsight. And he would often tell me like the CEO job is the loneliest job. I was like, how much lonelier can it get than what I'm doing in the CMO role? Like my team's out doing happy hours. I'm not getting invited to those.
Yeah.
Like it's fine, like whatever. And it wasn't until I did the job, or am doing the job, that I realized like probably two things that suck the most. One is like and especially for an early stage business, it all falls on your shoulders at the end of the day. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Things that you're really good at and things you're really bad at, actually, like you are still accountable to our ability to like put a roadmap together, given some like platform instabilities, and our ability to share that with confidence to a customer who is at risk of leaving because we're not communicating appropriately. And you're like, I don't know how to solve that problem, but I have to I have to figure out how. That's really hard when you don't feel empowered with the experience and the knowledge, and that speaks to the importance of having a great team around you, right, and all of those types of things. But even a great team, right? They're not carrying the equity that you're carrying really into the business. Now, the second part of it is the context switching. I find to be very hard. Going from a pipeline call that, let's say, is going really good, and then you talk to an investor that's like has deeper questions, to then a procurement call with a high quality prospect that is pushing you on price, to an employee that's frustrated, to do a podcast, and your ability to like switch your brain between all of these things is really hard. So I would say those are probably two of the biggest elements that have surprised me, because like academically, like it's been told to me, but until you feel it, you're like, okay, this is really hard. This is definitely really hard.
I think over the years of doing this, you learn to quickly change between the things, but be in the zone with it. So you're like the best on the podcast, the best on the sales call, the best on the procurement, the best on the finance, and you're like pick up things, and you're like only there. It's actually one of the skills that I mostly appreciate in myself and my co-founder, is the fact that we can be present in this moment, like be full in on and etc. And then you can do the same in your real life, because you know that this is the time you completely get everything on the table. You are not thinking about the work at home and at home at work. You're just really in the moment, because you know that you need to be the best in that one thing that you're doing right now in this moment. No slacking.
Yeah. No, it's hard, right? It's hard because in addition to all of this, it turns out, I've heard this somewhere, that you're not just all about work. Also, you have a family or friends or like yourself to prioritize. And then imagine being the best in all the moment. You probably feel this in your co-founder. Then come, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night or whatever, you turn off for a minute and you're like, I'm exhausted. Like now I have to show up in my kind of journey as a husband and a father, and haven't been able to, let's say, prioritize myself in a while. It's hard to be kind of the complete human being.
That's true.
And also be a, really great present founder.
Yeah.
For sure.
someone asked me, what do you remember for the first 5 years of building the company, or like what are the brightest moment of your life during those 5 years? And I
Yeah.
spaced out. It's like, listen, I really worked a lot. So I like, for me, it was like, that's one. And then like, oh shit. And then someone said, okay, that is the sacrifice. That is like,
Yeah.
that you put on the line to achieve where you are. Right. So just think about that.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
do
that's good.
you appreciate the most then of being a founder right now? Something that you got that you didn't have at being an executive.
First of all, a lot of learnings. Like, and I know it sounds kind of silly to say, but I was a CMO for a third time at Hopin. And, you know, I had the concept for AudiencePlus during my time at Hopin, so this was never going to be an option. But imagine like if I were to go into a fourth run as a CMO, I'd be like, I can't do it. I just can't do it a fourth time. Whether it's I can't pull the team over because I've already, you know, worked with the people I want to work with, and like I can't bring them over to like a fourth place, or just going to work every day, having the same kind of, you know, rhythms. And it feels kind of privileged to say that. I don't mean it in the sense of like I'm, you know, like I know a lot of folks would kill for that opportunity, but I wasn't learning much at the end of the day. And, you know, again, as I thought about like the horizon for my career, I wanted to, you know, while still in my, you know, 30s or whatever, like try something different. So the amount of learning from everything, right? In terms like going to 0-1 with product was probably the biggest learning, but even like, how do you pay people? Like, I've never set up payroll or figured out like how to report taxes or all of these things that you take for granted when you work at a big company. You're like, can we send that person an offer letter and then they just magically show up on their first day? So that I think is the heart of it. But the other part of it too is like the emotional side of starting a company. Cause like, you know, we have amazing days at AudiencePlus. We have hard days, but like I get to go to work every day with a team that I believe in, championing change in the market that we have such deep conviction for that you don't have like that, the at least as a founder, maybe some folks on the team do, but like you don't have like the Sunday scaries or like the fear of Monday morning or, you know, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because you have just such calibration behind like your purpose and kind of your effort. And that's something, you know, I'd say I had it a lot at Gainsight, but I'd been hungry for and searching for ever since. And so I think this gives me just a lot of meaning behind my work, which I've really appreciated.
Yeah, that's a huge motivation source. Even if you're building something that won't be a unicorn, right? When this is just a good business, a good company, a good product, a solid thing, right? But you wake up in the morning on Monday and you're like, oh, I really want to do that. This is the best thing. I will make it count. I love that.
Totally.
What would you do differently at Gainsight if you were to do the CMO job again?
It's like an hour podcast on this topic. I think there's two things that come to mind for me. One is I would have invested in product marketing a lot earlier because and I'm trying to right that wrong now at AudiencePlus in a way, because there was so much effort and, you know, blood, sweat, and tears or whatever going into making customer success, the category, the language, the taxonomy known in the world. And that involved like, again, putting on events and a lot of content and all of these things.
Yeah.
And it worked. Ultimately, it worked. But if we don't do a good enough job building the muscles to actually convert thought leadership into revenue, and I think that's product marketing's kind of the bridge between those two groups, then the challenge is growth slows or stalls, or it takes a while to catch up to the momentum that you're building at the top of funnel. And so at Gainsight in particular, you know, they've long since crossed the chasm now, but during my tenure there, it probably wasn't until the last 2 years or so where we started to see the monetization catch up to the buzz in the market that was there. So from that perspective, I would prioritize, you know, if you're a great brand marketer or CMO that is sort of driven by the creative side, make sure that you can put in the motions early to convert that thought leadership into revenue. And the other thing is I wouldn't have left. Honestly, I was there for 7 years.
Yeah.
I worked for a values-driven leader who is a mentor of mine to this day. The company had a lot of, sort of new skills to learn. I think I was sort of like, I went from effectively, and Nick would say the same, I think here, being in a place where I was the risk taker to a place where I had to be more efficient and figure out a way to 60 people in marketing, like you're just managing to the spreadsheet. You're trying to do the things a little bit cheaper every year. And I lost a little bit of that hunger.
Yeah.
But that was the reason I left. It wasn't because there wasn't this amazing, again, culture. It wasn't that there wasn't a lot of, financial milestones still ahead of us as a company. But I spent the rest of my time since looking for a company like Gainsight, and it didn't exist. And so I've been working on creating that now. So I think I would have stayed until feeling the prompting to start AudiencePlus.
Now, since Gainsight, you took 2 other jobs with Front and Hopin before AudiencePlus, right? And I saw somewhere that you referenced the team that you built at Hopin, if I believe, up to 30 people, and you were a very successful, very tight team. I didn't see anything, maybe I didn't look through that old post about the Gain Insights marketing team that you built. Have you had impact, did you as a CMO, when you were promoted, build that marketing team as well? And if yes, what principles in building the team that you learned as a Gainsight MBA that you brought in then to enhance in Front and then Hopin?
Yeah, Front was sort of an outlier. Well, I guess they both were outliers, but Front, I sort of inherited a team. And inherited a team really right as COVID was hitting. And so it was sort of a different, I think I recruited 2 people, based 3 maybe actually to Front. I had sort of my lieutenant, my right hand that I'd worked with at Gainsight, and I convinced him to join at Front. So that was massively impactful and important. And he's gone on now to become the CMO of a company. But I don't think there are too many learnings there. Hopin was a story in the sense that, first of all, I was the 5th marketer on the team or something, and we grew to over, I think it was 37 or so in about 12 months. The headline is Hopin was what I would argue the best marketing team in SaaS that the world will never see. It was almost like we put together the basketball analogy, 97 Chicago Bulls that never played a playoff game or something because we just ran out of time. And the hiring principles there and the learnings from it, one I would say is it was unusual because Hopin at the time was the fastest growing company in the world. And so the charter was go hire people, go build, we're not doing a bottoms up right now, go get who you need in order to build the team the right way. And so my approach, number 2, wasn't to basically say, okay, well, let's do a jobs to be done framework, figure out okay, these are my first 2 hires that I would make that are critical to get this done. It was let me go find the leaders and build the leadership team in marketing and then have them build their team their way. Because again, this wouldn't work in a traditional company because, you don't have a carte blanche kind of hiring situation here. But we were building a generational business in very accelerated time horizon. And so I found the best events leader, especially for our business, that I've ever worked with in my career and convinced her to join. The best brand leader that I could ever imagine. And we had him join. And so the leadership team we built, and then what that enabled happen next is the third order, which is they hired their lieutenants and their trusted people. And so just up and down the org chart, it was part of the reason I was I cannot do this again because I've seen what the best team looks like. And again, unfortunately, we won't be able to, see what could have been possible had we kept going. Yeah, tough to imagine how a company could mirror that today. Again, in this economy, it's probably not a best practice for any company that isn't Stripe or very, very fast growing kind of upper quartile or decile growth companies. But it was a shot worth taking for sure.
Oh, what were the top 3 challenges of a CMO in a hypergrowth company?
At the end of the day, part of the, not criticism, but the analysis and reflection on Hopin was that it was so tied to the pandemic. It's hard again to say that that was like a lesson that would be repeated again in our lifetimes, at least. Who knows, maybe. But the part of it for us was we had so much inbound demand to base that the strategy of the company was basically to fulfill the inbound demand rather than generate demand or create demand and market. And so one of the lessons, maybe I'm going to try to build a bridge to reality here, but if you're a company that's growing very fast organically, don't bet on that. don't take too long to not diversify your channels of growth and make sure that you've built something that's a bit more sustainable or something that you can actually control your destiny a little bit. I think we were doing that at Hopin. It wasn't basically the mistake I made there was demand gen wasn't the first hire we made. In fact, it was the last executive hire we made because of the organic growth that we were seeing and didn't expect that to slow down as fast as it did. The second then is like the product side. And so ensuring that like you might have immense product market fit for a specific use case. But what happens when the market changes? What happens when, a competitor comes into your space or something? How can you differentiate the product value proposition so you can withstand some of the highs and lows or the changing winds of your industry? In our case, we had the virtual events product. We started building some others and things, but it took the company too long to really pivot to serve those emerging use cases where we were like really well known for the primary. And the main one, at least for Hopin story, is like just because you have a carte blanche hiring kind of card, don't that's not always a good idea either. And I think it wasn't really just in marketing, but across sales in particular and others. I think this company spend plan kind of can catch up with you if you're growing fast. It's almost like even if you're a CMO in hypergrowth, like pretend like you're not. Like pretend that you're like resources are tight and you have to prove the impact of everything. Don't get sort of comfortable in the success that you're seeing because it may not be there forever.
I think that's the lesson that every CMO in 2024 knows and live by, right? Be scrappy.
Oh yeah. For sure. Scars to prove it.
Yeah. What is that like to work with some of the best people? Like what's the difference in the feeling of like when you work with the best, what does it entail and what explain me the difference because I want to understand whether do I have the greatest or I would know when I have the greatest, Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing. I love how you framed it at the end because, and forgive me, make one more sports analogy, but you can recruit and trade players and get people who on paper are just the best. They have the work history, they have the skill set, they killed it at the interview, they have great references, and you can put them all on your quote unquote team wearing the same jersey, but then the chemistry is not there, or there's like, for whatever reason, there's something that is adding headwind to that sort of dynamic, I guess, at the team.
Yeah.
So, I would argue both certainly at Hopin, but also at Gainsight for most of our time there, there's just something that you just know. Like I like how you said it, where you just feel like everyone has a shared sense of ownership around the outcome.
Yeah.
A lot of humility around the putting the work in and the process. And there's no like, I'm a director, I'm a VP, I don't need to like update the deck or whatever. There's a sense of like responsiveness that I would sort of root in like respect for each other, that you like, hey, we have, we try not to work on Saturdays and not email each other and keep some space, but I know if I needed something, you'd be there for me as a teammate or as a leader, whatever the case is. And so I think those are some of the aspects to it, but the outcome of all of that is this like just calibration around impact that is very hard to measure. But maybe the best way is sort of like, you talk to each person on the team, or there's like an ENPS or something, or maybe it's a leadership team offsite. And you're sitting around like, the fire on some offsite, and you just have this sense of like, gosh, we got it good right here. Like this is really good. And so I'm trying to build that now. It takes a while to like, how do you make magic happen, right? This is what the great, GMs and sports are able to do. But when you have it, you know it.
Yeah. How would you rate the alignment between sales and marketing at Gainside, Hopin, Front, and what did it depend on in each company?
It's funny, I work for such two outliers there with Front and Hopin. Let me start with Gainsight.
Yeah.
I think that if you were a sales professional, let's say you worked at like Snowflake or something, and you're used to making like, high 6 figures, 7 figures a year, taking existing budget, they're using Oracle or whatever,
Right.
and I want to convince you to use Snowflake this year, rip out the old, put in the new. You would hate the idea of marketing coming to the pipeline call saying, we're going to launch a podcast or we're going to host a conference and we're going to make it 90s themed and have Vanilla Ice perform.
Right.
They're like, what are you doing? Like, how does that help me achieve my number for the year? And so this was not an overnight thing. And it's still, I mean, gosh, I haven't been at Gainsight now for years. And so I'm not saying this is like currently the case, but you have to have two things, I think, on either end of the relationship. On the marketing end, this sort of like servant leadership kind of mentality, kind of a thing that, hey, our job in marketing is help support you in sales and achieving your numbers and goals. That's why we exist. Like ultimately everything we're doing somewhere on the line has to somehow contribute to your team hitting your number. And awareness of that, deeply believing that, and even talking about it with sales, I think is an important starting point. But then on the sales side is you have to sort of embrace the value selling motion, saying like, we are selling much more than a software product here. We're selling business transformation. That comes in the shape of our content, our events, our, all of these different things that we're running. And, all of these things together create this overall solution that's going to help you achieve your outcomes, with our products and also, around them. Again, that's not a good fit for the sales rep that wants, the rip and replace kind of quick, high velocity type motions. So I think that understanding has really fueled our success at Gainsight, trying to model that a little bit here at AudiencePlus as well. Front was different. It was sort of like a product-led kind of business with some sales assist. And so what was marketing at Front, at least, as I got there, it was a little bit more on like messaging, kind of some category work. I don't think during my tenure there, I don't know if I was super successful on making marketing like this giant kind of pipeline generator, honestly, for that team, because so much of it was like founder led, self-serve type of motions. We had only started spinning up like outbound prospecting and ABM and supporting the team there. So a lot of my time there was on like, what's the corporate narrative for the business? How do we activate that? How do we go from 0 to 1 with content that's not just SEO? And then Hopin, it was just crazy, man. It was like there was no like marketing was like the cherry on top, because it was like, if marketing can help us, great, but at the end of the day, like we need more reps on the other side of the phone to like fulfill this demand. So, but the one story there on Hopin is we hosted this hybrid event right in the heart of the pandemic called Illuminate, and we want to show the world what great looked like, what great event execution looked like for a company that sells events, the software that champions event marketers. And it ended up being, a really good event for the company. And so I remember feeling some like appreciation at that event, being like, okay, so like you gave us a really good case study to point to of what excellence looks like.
What excellence look like? Can you give me an example of an excellence?
In 2021?
What was the excellence back then? Yeah.
Well, back then, remember, people weren't really traveling for in-person events.
Right.
And so this was a season of the industry where we were trying to figure out, we went like deep into virtual events. I think all of us got a little exhausted of like attending, glorified webinar for 10 hours.
All webinars.
Yeah. So what we did was we created this like in-person experience in downtown Los Angeles. We invited our top prospects and customers to attend. We invested deeply in like health and safety, which at the time was everything from like testing people on site with rapid kind of results, contact tracing, like really getting deep into all of that, to creating this experience for the people in person that, they had like privileged access and behind the scenes type of opportunities with the speakers that were there. For the people watching from home, it was like this hosted, curated experience. It wasn't like a one-off webinar or whatever with like session,
Right.
45-minute blocks. There was a host, there was entertainment, it was faster moving. And so we were able, I actually don't remember the results, but we were able to generate a ton of attendees virtually.
Yeah.
And then for our in-person experience, it was, we built our like customer advisory board on top of it. So we had all of this activation that really built relationship with our customers and partners in a really meaningful way. Honestly, the event we just did at Audience Plus like is inspired a lot by that experience.
I wanted to say that exactly. If you watch the recording of the Golden Hour, that's exactly the type of vibe that I was getting with like the studio and the hosts and like the cameras that are, and then the keynotes and all that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think you also guys took it from some kind of like a esport tournament, like when people are playing Dota 2 or like Counter-Strike, and there's some host and then, and the people discussing the keynote and asking the question. Yeah.
That's exactly. Oh yeah, totally. That was exactly. I mean, first of all, marketing is a lot more fun and easy when you just look for like experience, like cognitive references people already have. And you're like, let's bring that into our like boring world of whatever it is that we're doing. Right. And so, for me, it was like college game day, college football here in the States. They have this like hosted halftime kind of desk and they bring on experts and it's curated. And the idea was we wanted to protect the sort of integrity of what was happening in the room and create FOMO. But we wanted the outside audience to still feel like they were part of the broader kind of education and had like exclusive access for free. They didn't even have to like really register for it. And the idea was that would also help us drive registrations and brand for awareness for next year's conference. But I think, the whole thought exercise was, okay, with COVID behind us, what does the future of events actually look like? I just don't think we're going to get back to like 10,000 people in a convention center. I think there's opportunity for more smaller activations in different cities where it's more, because people don't get on a plane anymore to go listen to a keynote. They get in a plane to go meet each other and be a part of some exclusive experience that they can't get from behind their screen. So that's a lot of, I think, the inspiration for what we ended up doing. Golden Hour.
Okay. Finishing a few questions about the Gainside. What's the toughest decision you've ever made at Gainside?
I have a funny answer. I have to give a serious one too here. Let me see. It's public knowledge at this point, but we were pretty close to $1 million over budget for Pulse, our conference in 2017. It was 90s themed. And we were very over budget, like very over. Like I should have been fired for blowing the budget that bad.
Yeah.
And we had an opportunity on top of all of that expense to get the Backstreet Boys to perform at the conference. And this was back when like the 90s were having a comeback. Backstreet Boys had like a residency in Las Vegas. And I was like, oh my gosh, we can be the B2B company that had Backstreet Boys. And what made matters even more crazy is the after party where this would have happened was on an aircraft carrier in the San Francisco Bay. And so we ended up like basically doing the deal or getting to a place where like the contract still had to be signed, but we built this whole video program announcing the Backstreet Boys. We announced it internally, created a lot of buzz and hype, got everyone really excited. And then it was literally like a weekend where I was like, this is probably a really bad idea, like really, really bad idea from a budget perspective.
Yeah.
Would have put us over like 1.7 or something on this event. And I came back to my CEO. I was like, I know it was my idea. I know I started all this. I know whatever, but like we have to pull the plug on the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
And we ended up pulling the plug and we replaced them with a $5,000 cover band that did amazing. And they were awesome and they were so good. But deciding not to secure the Backstreet Boys to perform at our industry conference might have saved my career. I can't tell. I either would have been fired or something, but really glad we didn't go through that. What's the hardest decision I made that was not the boy band related? I mean, I think most of the hard decisions are always personnel related in my mind. There were a few, hirings and firings, I would say, that carried a lot of weight at the company. And I think that probably when I left, I don't know that I left my person that was going to take the CMO role after me. I don't know that I set him up for success very well. And so I think, being very thoughtful with not just how you exit a company, because I think I did it on like good terms, of course, and did everything that was asked of me and all of that.
Yeah.
But I think thinking through sort of how your decision for your career can actually impact others intentionally or as sort of a second order. And I think that I probably could have thought through that a little bit more.
That's a nice one. Do you have any regrets besides obviously leaving and not staying longer and going through that frustration of the scale? Anything else that you regret about?
Really, because I think, I mentioned earlier how software companies aren't saving the world. Really, we're helping, well, SaaS companies at least, we're trying to just help companies be more effective and all of that. Gainsight really added like a profound amount of meaning to my work for being an operator. And I think if you asked a frontline, like first job out of college type person, they would probably say the same thing about that business. And Nick gets the credit for that with the culture that he built, the values that, they deeply mean and aren't just like marketed out to the world.
Right.
So, there's probably some like little things along the way, but I don't have too many regrets from that experience in general, because it really felt like, to the majority of our conversation, like we were clicking, we were doing something noble, and I think that that all led to some really good memories and kind of reflections ever since.
What's the toughest decision you've made so far at AudiencePlus?
Yeah, so probably deciding that my co-founder wasn't going to be the person to take us to the next chapter with the company, which part of that was really around this idea of re-architecture, like the sort of V1 version of the platform that we built it the wrong way. Create a lot of not just technical debt, but we created basically after a lot of like feedback and advice that we got from peers and others, it was a one-way door. There was no way for us to improve how we built the product without rewriting it from the ground up.
Yeah.
And so that was a very hard conversation.
Yeah.
The impact of that was transformative, meaning like, there are a lot of engineers that were loyal to him as well. And exited the company. It was happening during the time of my life which was probably the hardest month of my life for sure on a personal side. And all of that sort of had to happen. And only in reflection, you're like, it took me too long. It happened too late. Like I should have done it earlier. But transformative because, where are we at now? 7 months later, like we've rebuilt the entire product. It's on a scalable kind of, ground built, with from a place of best practice. And now we're in a position to really go and innovate from here. So by far the hardest and the most stressful decision made so far in our 2 years.
I've done that. I've had to let go of my CMO, and one of the first people that I hired and brought on, and who was like a partner. We've been building a company for 6 years, and at some point in time, he was the blocker of the progress. He wasn't like, we were not growing because he wasn't there. He wasn't empowering. He was like stagnating and just being confident about this. And me and my co-founder, we had to make the conversation one of the hardest one. And you never cannot handle it right? Like how you approach it, how you talk to it, what's happened after that is just one of the hardest. And talking about the technical co-founder, it's funny when I mentioned that I made all the mistakes, because like we built the architecture that it wasn't scalable, and we spent 15 months refactoring it without building new features to be able to get it. But we didn't fire and we didn't let go. We sticked with our CTO, which is CPO. But the point was that I don't know whether it's the right decision or not. I don't know that, and the reason I don't know that is if he realizes how we covered his back of decisions he making, and we still on and working with him, then he would appreciate and then learn faster. right? But if he doesn't appreciate that and doesn't reflect on it, then we made a huge business mistake. And because we are bootstrapping and we're owning the 100% of the company, we can own that, right?
Yeah.
But if I had an investor and the board and someone that I can talk to, and they will all tell me, Michael, this is a no-go. This is the worst decision that could ever happen. So, life is life, right? So
yeah. And it turns out it's also like at either side, bootstrapping or, venture scale, like apparently like a mistake a lot of people make, it turns out, which, I mean, I don't know if I could feel better at all about it, but maybe like 0.5%. Like I'm like, all right, well, I'm not alone kind of a thing.
No, we're not technical founders. So you're not.
Exactly. All you can do is trust. All you can do is trust that your partner is going to build it in the right way.
Sure.
And again, I'm not alleviating myself from any of the responsibility for this type of thing, but like when you trust and it doesn't end up being the right thing, I think like the faster you can make that decision, the better is probably like the big learning.
Yeah. And maybe people that are listening to this won't agree with you, a lot of the technical people, engineers, but like the engineers have a very high ego with themselves. They're not as humble as the other roles, right? And when you're a young CTO that done something and you're like on the rise, you think that you know the best, that this senior architect that been in the industry for 20 years don't know, they're old guys, they don't know how these things work, and I know the better. And at some point in time when you're scaling, you up and you're like, oh, okay. And you don't make up on your mistake because, so I don't know whether you had the same or not, but like every time I meet, it's like
a personal attack, right? If it's like, hey, I think we built this wrong or we made some wrong technical assumptions. It's like, I am taking that personally as an attack on my capability. Yeah. And I would argue sometimes that could be everywhere in the org, or in the sense that like a lot of, I do think there is a lot here from the innovation perspective. But I've seen it in marketing too, where people are like, it's not my fault that we didn't hit the number or that this program went over or whatever. And the sort of feedback is a personal attack on my identity as a marketer or whatever. And so I think we have to sort of find ways to like, I don't know, the coaching to anyone on the other end of that is to find ways to like separate the facts from the personal kind of attack and try to rise above it.
Yeah. All right, so wanted to chat a few minutes about Golden Hour. So I've heard a lot about the event. I've seen so many people posting positive feedback about the event. So congrats on the success.
Thank you.
The question is, how did it go for you? Did you think it was successful?
I did. It was one of those things that like we're working our board meetings tomorrow, and so working on like how do I tell the story of what happened a month and a half ago in one slide or in a way that doesn't sound kind of weird, but it kind of draws a little bit of what we were talking about earlier from like a team that works really well. Like when you're in the middle of a program or there's this moment happening and you look around and you're like, this is it. Like this works. This is really, really good. We felt that way about Golden Hour. So on the qualitative side, I would say very proud of what we did. It's also year one of like a multi-year vision. And so in many ways, what we've done is we've proven a hypothesis with Golden Hour this year that is going to be expanded upon in many years to come. A format to which we talked about in terms of like this blend of like in-person intimate experiences and digital kind of at scale content as well, post-event content, and how we kind of think about creation of content on site. So from that perspective, it was really good. We hit our attendee goals, which was great. That's always important. We missed budget by a little bit. So I think there's a lot of room to make up. It's also really hard on a first year event, I think, to find ways to like get sponsors, activated and get people to pay a certain amount. So I think those are little things that we can improve going into future years. But I think the best part of Golden Hour was this sort of like feeling again that wasn't something we as sort of employees at AudiencePlus alone felt. But if you can make your community feel something, like you've done something pretty special. And we pulled just some select LinkedIn posts for the board deck, but things like not to be dramatic, but Golden Hour was one of the best days of my life. Someone wrote like, someone else was like, this was one of the best right? Like, I mean, what do you say to that? Like, that you just feel so validated, right? As a marketer.
Kind words. I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's literally slide one. It's like title slide and then that, basically. So thank you to if you're listening to this, for writing that. But people felt like they weren't alone. And marketing, as you know well, is an industry that over the last 4 years, let alone, the years before it, we've been through a lot. We've been through kind of the onset of COVID and figuring out how to be productive as we work from home and kind of retreat back into our home offices and be productive there, to the post-COVID boom where we couldn't grow fast enough or spend money fast enough. Reference the Hopin conversation today, to the pullback around efficient growth and budgets being taken away and layoff after layoff. Many of us affected personally or know of people who were or had to administer a layoff, and we're just tired. And now, we're trying to execute and hit our number and do the things we're trying to do using a playbook that is just not working in the same way that it was before. And so to be able to pack a room full of people or a digital audience that can empathize with that and can look to each other for support, but then look to the stage or the conversations in the network hall for ideas and inspiration, that ultimately I think was the greatest gift from Golden Hour.
What were you trying to accomplish with Golden Hour?
That was a big part of it, right? Like, in the sense that Golden Hour, like, there are much more efficient ways of time and money if it was just about pipeline. And again, there was definitely meetings set before, during, and after Golden Hour. There's definitely a play for us to for those that are in market for software to be able to kind of monetize through that.
Right.
But the bigger kind of concept here is we wanted to align the AudiencePlus brand with this movement that we're creating around owned media. And we very much think owned media is the sort of the next evolution of inbound marketing. Very kind of similar in terms of the intention behind it, but different channels, different kind of content formats, different ways of measuring, and really a way that's much more aligned to where the industry is headed. And so, Inbound Marketing had their Inbound conference. Marketing Automation had the Marketing Nation Summit. Yeah. And so much of this goes beyond just the products that we build, but this kind of education around the best practice that we want to go and advocate out into the world. So in some cases, you could kind of translate that into like a long game. But also, I think that there's a lot of in-quarter, in-year impact from doing these events, because now there's this perception that AudiencePlus is like a thought leader in this new movement of marketing, right?
I think events like this, if you do it right, it's the highest level of content creation that you can do.
That's right.
It's like in terms of the online, offline, packing the people, the content, the audience, the community. This is the highest that you can go. Yeah. It's like in terms of the velocity and the context of it and stuff. So. Totally. And again, this was first time you guys do that with a small team. Again, congratulations, success. Like Thank saw you. The recording of it. It's amazing, and I would love to join you guys next year. It was incredible. Like the format, insane. So kudos. Thank you. All right, I have one last question. So it's a new thing that I will be doing. Question from the anonymous fan. All right.
Okay. Nice.
So basically, here it goes. So. You're the person who knows everybody, they say, and you're liked by everyone who matters. How do you feel about this assessment?
Oh my gosh. I'm blushing a little bit, first of all. Knows everybody is, first of all, thank you. Thank you, whoever wrote that. Well, I think there's sort of a work kind of reaction that I have, and a very human kind of personal reaction to it. On the work side, I would say what I've learned is the most important thing in your career are the relationships that you make, like ultimately, like that. And I've tried my best to like maintain relationships. I've tried my best to like just really care deeply about the people. And a lot of that was modeled for me. Again, going back to our conversations, Nick, my CEO at Gainsight, he at scale, I think he still does this. He says yes to people that want to buy him a cup of coffee or take 30 minutes to like get his advice on something, and they're a $200-something million ARR business, and he's finding his calendars back. And I don't know, I would assess like half of those are actual, like, I don't know, maybe I'm making an assumption here, but a lot of those are just helping people. Yeah. And so I've tried to say yes to meetings and help people along the way. And I think, that didn't really scale very well, but I think it's probably a reason why I've been able to build a little bit of a network and kind of maintain that.
What's your approach to building strong professional connection? What's your
say
approach?
Yes and
You just
be
say
very
yes.
reactive to your calendar. No, I mean, there's a better way, probably. There's a better approach than than that. But whether it's LinkedIn or email, you get asked by people, "Hey, I'm working on a new startup, or we're building an event, or we want to hire like a content marketer. Can I bend your ear for 30 minutes, or whatever?" And when you're really busy, like especially now as a founder, it's like a different level.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like I could just really use like some time to work, or there's so much to get done, or whatever. It's so easy to say no. So just saying yes was really kind of the not scalable. It's the Airbnb, like going around taking photos of Airbnb listings thing. And no way it scales, but I think you're gonna end up building like a pretty big relationship kind of graph of your career if you do that.
I love that.
And then just personally, I mean, look, I think like, again, we spend a third of our lives at work. The other third, I think, is asleep or something, right? So we're definitely at work. This is our sphere of influence, and this is our community, and these are the people that I look up to, and then the older I get, more that might look up to me, and so I don't care if audience. Well, I care, but it would not be an attack on my identity if AudiencePlus fails, or if Hopin fails as it did, or Front or Gainsight. What would be an attack on my identity is if people said, "Oh, that guy's a jerk," or like, "Gosh, like a lot of LinkedIn followers, but he's a total like bad guy," whatever. That would be the thing, on my deathbed or whatever, that I would regret. And so I'd be very happy to know that, like, again, my list of accomplishments are behind me now, but that I could just show up as like a person who cares about their character and has made an influence somewhere in that regard.
Being liked and respected by a lot of peers is more difficult task than getting the ARR up, right?
Yeah.
So
totally.
Yeah. So and again, like a proof of this, like I reached out to you on LinkedIn, just send a message, "Hey, would you like to join me for the show?" I said, "Sure, send me an email, let's do that."
Yeah.
That's easy. We were not introduced, we're not connected, although we might have a few connections that we both know, but anyhow. So I have this, it's called this or that section. I have a bunch of questions and you need to choose this or that. All right?
Okay.
And
sounds good.
because you've been an executive for so long and now you're the founder, I wanted to kind of pick your brains on like comparing both to what you're getting from both. All right? So this or that section, stability or flexibility?
Every day is a different adventure. Probably flexibility, especially being a dad. Like I've got little kids, and the ability to be in like, in different places, and we're not like super nomadic or anything, but we live in Arizona where it's very hot. And so in the summer we spend time in New York, which is why you see some oceany things behind me here on camera. And if I had a job that was like extremely stable, but locked me into Arizona for the rest of my life, I would have a very difficult time feeling like I'm giving my family the best of myself, or just kind of the best experience. So flexibility for me.
Resource availability or resourcefulness?
I value resourcefulness much more than resource availability. I think that's true of me as a executive and a founder, as an entrepreneur, especially in this season of our market, right? And like marketing budgets, for example, are not what they used to be, and so everyone's getting pressed to do more with less. And there's this, I think, epidemic going on. Jason Lemkin's been talking about this quite a bit. This is a whole other thing, but on people don't want to like do the work anymore. We hired people who want like the title and maybe the comp package and all of that. And so I would argue resourcefulness might be, at least in the marketing world, but maybe in every other one, probably one of the highest value attributes of a candidate to get a job and be successful in their role in this season.
Yeah. Specialization or generalization?
I think I just subscribe to specialization in general, in the sense of like double down on what you're great at, and it's okay. If you don't have all the answers. I think, and again, this might be different for like people in a job versus like products you build. I think there's definitely a consolidation play happening in software, but I think the best brands in the world, and this probably is true of people as well as companies, are ones who can clearly articulate why they should exist and the change they want to see in the world, and be ruthless around that, and not feel the temptation to water down who they are or their message in general. So I'll go with specialization.
I love that. Listen, these are tough ones. I'm sorry about them. Yeah.
More?
All right.
More tough ones?
I have, let's do more.
All right.
Defined role versus expansive responsibility.
Expansive responsibility? I think stage dependent, right? I think at our stage right now, we need expansive responsibility. We just need great people that can do stuff. And it's a great way to build a career, by the way. If you're like, hey, I just want to work at a startup, I want to cut my teeth, I want to learn what I'm good at, then I think early stage startups might be a good place to do that. But I think as you scale and you look to build systems and processes, there is a lot of value from like subject matter experts in like markups, marketing operations around lead scoring, right? Or whatever it is. Like, somebody can learn that, or somebody's built a career on that. There's somebody in my network that is one of the leading pricing experts for SaaS. I'm like, gosh, when you get to a certain level of scale, you just need that expert that knows how to do that thing. So I think it's stage dependent, but for where we are today, we'll take the Jane of all trades role any day.
Once we passed the 200 people, we started looking for compensation and benefit specialists. And I was like, there's a person that actually specializes on building the compensation schemes, right? And then, or like I have a grant specialist, the person who submits for grants, basically, and just right, and it's just like this is the only thing that the person does. So one of the things that I know for myself and a lot of people that I talk to made this mistake is when you meet someone and you're a startup and you meet a great guy and you're like, oh, you should work with me, we should do this. But you don't have a defined role for the person. So you start creating the defined roles. It's like, okay, you can do this or that, but you don't have actually need for the role, right? So actually defining the role and being very specific about who you're looking for, what is the requirements, and hiring that person when the time is right for that is the best, right? Because if you're just trying to build the role for the person because of the person is great, it's a no-go.
Yeah, you get in trouble that way.
All right, next one, risk management versus risk taking.
Maybe stage dependent as well, but me as, I don't know, the type of environment I want to be in is much more on the risk taking side. I'd probably do a bad job as a McKinsey analyst or something in my career. So risk taking, I mean, look, like first of all, in my industry, working in SaaS, right? We're building software to help companies make more money at the end of the day. That's like the heart of what we do. We're not, curing diseases. We're not like solving like massive world problems. There can be debated on that, I guess, but like at the very like root level. So like we should, think about our impact in this industry where we are working day in, putting more time into our jobs than the time we spend with families. As to like to some extent swing for the fences or like do the things that are really going to make an outsized impact on behalf of the company, the community, and our own kind of careers. So I would just much rather work in a place where people are aligned around high ambition and taking risks than risk mitigation. But again, I'm a marketer too at heart. Like if I'm accounting or finance, you don't want to hear that. You want to hear a much different answer.
No, finance is not the risk takers. No, but they shouldn't be. Like the best person in the company is the CFO, who will tell you no, who you need to back for the budget, who would like, I cannot spend $50 on this tool because you didn't budget that. And I don't care whether you're CEO or the founder or the owner of the business. You didn't budget the $50, pay from your own pocket. The best people in the company.
Important.
All right.
Totally.
What would you say early on in the career, corporate support or entrepreneurial independence?
If you're an early career person?
Yeah.
Ooh, I mean, it depends on how early. I'm giving you a lot of depends here. That's not, I might be breaking the rules. If you're super early, first job out of university or what have you, look, I think there's something to this idea that like you are there to like basically get paid to learn a craft in a way.
Yeah.
To which I would put a premium on relationships, on mentorship, on pattern matching and learning what others around you are doing, and honing your skills. And again, guess what? You get paid for that too. It's like an MBA you're getting paid for. That's amazing. So I would put a premium probably in your earliest of career moments into the corporate kind of experience than going rogue. Because if you're like, again, fresh out of school, you've never seen the movie before and you're going off rogue, like working on something, that might end up being just an inefficient use of time or not what is really going to help the company achieve their goals. I do think as your career scales, there's a moment though that happens. And in that moment, probably what separates some of the greats that I've seen and others that have sort of, built good careers, but kind of go on in themselves is you sort of like irrationally sign up for the job that you're not fully equipped for. So for me, my story is I was a product manager. And then my CEO from Gainsight asked me to come on board and lead marketing. I've never worked in marketing a day in my life. And he knew that. It wasn't like lying to him or anything. And I, at Gainsight, was my first marketing job as the CMO, basically as the head of marketing, where I had to learn the craft and be entrepreneurial and all of that. But I had spent, 5-6 years or so in working in startups, understanding different parts of the business, kind of understanding how things go. So a long answer, but I think I would start with like that corporate experience first.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining Belkins Podcast. Appreciate you, man. It's been an amazing conversation interview.
That's a good conversation. Thank you.